All right, so we are back, and again today we're talking about the Coercive Acts, also known as the Intolerable Acts. They are passed in 1774, so let's go ahead and get started with what they are. First of all, let's understand that these take place in the aftermath of the Boston Tea Party. The king was absolutely furious. In fact, he was so angry, he said, "It's time. It's time to teach these colonists a lesson." We were being viewed as petulant children, toddlers basically throwing a temper tantrum. And the king believed, and Parliament believed, that they had been really very generous, that they had been very kind and accommodating, that we had been rebellious and doing all these different kinds of things, and that they had accepted it and been pushed a little bit. So they felt like they were being put upon as well. And now they decided, you know what? Enough is enough. You've done an incredible amount of damage. You've cost an incredible amount of money. It's time for us to teach you who's boss. Daddy's home, and it's time for you to learn a lesson. And so that's ultimately what these acts are. It's trying to teach a lesson to the colonists. They were just gonna beat the rebellious attitude out of us. So Parliament is going to quickly pass what they call the Coercive Act. Now, understand the language here, right? Because the Coercive Act is we're going to gently coerce them back into submission. We're going to gently coerce them back into being loyal British citizens. We're going to just gently coerce them. Just kind of this, it leaves an interesting idea with us, right? But here on this side of the pond, we call it something very different. We called it the Intolerable Acts, that they were so harsh, it was simply unbearable to live under them. So, what were they exactly that were so unbearable? First of all, we have to understand that the acts were generally designed to make life hard in all the colonies. They were going to say, "You had it pretty good, and we want to show you how good you had it. You'll remember the time before now very fondly because we're going to show you how hard life can be," right? With that said, they were focusing particularly on Massachusetts and more specifically on Boston. They viewed that as the hotbed of activity for rebels. They viewed it as kind of the head of the snake, that if they were able to chop it off, if they were able to isolate that and teach them a lesson, that the other colonists would fall into line and obey, that kind of the leadership was coming out of that area. And so the idea is to punish Boston. We're going to punish all the colonies, but specifically harsh in Boston. So the very first part, the Intolerable Acts are four or five different acts. We kind of roll into one. Excuse me. So the very first one is called the Boston Port Act, and it closes the port of Boston until all the damages from the Boston Tea Party can be repaid. Now that's an enormous sum, and it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick, especially with the port of Boston closed down, because you have to understand that a massive part of all New England's economy derived from that port, from the merchants who were importing things, from the exports of raw materials that we were sending back to England, the shipping. So you've got captains and crews, right? Sailors. You've got shipbuilders. You've got dock workers and longshoremen. You've got merchants and people who are transporting those goods. It's going to affect the shipment of and the harvest then of raw materials. A lot of people are affected by this, and their livelihoods suddenly dry up. This really hits Boston incredibly hard. It's going to be felt throughout Massachusetts. It's going to be felt throughout New England and really through all the northern colonies. Boston Port was the busiest in the entire New World at that time. So to shut it down was a serious blow. The next thing that we're going to see is that the Massachusetts Government Act is passed. Now, up until this time, we had no representation in Parliament, but they did allow us to kind of create these local assemblies. We could elect people that we trusted to represent us in dealing with small local matters, right? Creating some of those local codes and whatnot that would never rise to the level of Parliament. Parliament was never going to waste their time dealing with the day-to-day small issues of these colonies. They could handle that themselves. And so while it wasn't real power, it did give some people a little bit of local authority. Well, the government or Parliament and the king says, you know what, enough is enough. If you're going to complain about a lack of representation, we're going to show you that you really have no power at all. So they strip every town, every municipality, every city of all local control, and it's replaced, or that control is given over then to the governors. So more colonial control is stripped away from them, and the power of the crown grows, or at least the power of the crown in their day-to-day life. The third thing here is the Administrative Justice Act. This is a killer as well, because what it says is that if you are a British official, if you're an agent of the crown, you're immune from prosecution in the colonies. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be prosecuted. It means that you're not going to serve or you're not going to be judged here in the colonies. Instead, you're going to be sent back to Great Britain and you're going to stand trial there. The problem is they have such a bad view over there of the colonies as being backwards, as being uncivilized, as being uneducated. They see all the rebellious activity, and to them it seems like we're maybe out to get them, that we may make things up in order to cause problems. And so more often than not, the justice system is skewed in favor of the crown's officials, of the British officials. The other thing is it's going to become oftentimes a he said, she said type of thing, right? A person's word against another person's word. But the crown is going to bring their officials back to stand trial. Who's paying for the people who had criminal activity done against them? Right? Who's paying for them to go? And by the way, if somebody takes advantage, if one of these officials takes advantage of a farmer or a merchant, who can afford the passage and the time to go back to England? Remember, it's 3 months there and 3 months back. In order to get justice, you're going to have to give up a half a year of your life in order to go and do that. And even then, there's no guarantee that you'll win. And so what that does is it leaves the colonist feeling like there is no justice, because it's an incredibly rare thing for them to be able to testify against any official that may be perpetrating terrible things. Maybe they're stealing taxes. Maybe they're corrupt. Maybe they have been involved in theft or rape or murder. None of it matters. They're going to go back and they're going to be charged there, where they're often out of the reach of the word of the colonists that may be direct witnesses. And so that's a little bit of a problem. For many, they feel like now they've basically declared open season on us. Any royal officials who are unscrupulous or lack, proper ethics, they're going to find ways to take advantage of people, and we'll have no recourse. So that's a pretty big one. The last one here is the Quartering Act. Now, we already know that the Quartering Act exists, but this strengthens it. They're going to send more troops. They're going to strengthen that Quartering Act. And so that's going to be an additional financial burden on the colonists, not just in Boston, but all over the colonies. So those are kind of the four big parts of the Intolerable Acts. Now, Boston, that again was seen as a hotbed of resistance, it's where John Hancock and Samuel Adams are located. These are the leaders of those movements. If we can cut the head of the snake off, then everybody else will fall in line. However, they hoped to punish Boston in that way. They hoped that everybody else would fall in line, that the rebellion, this fledgling rebellion, would simply fade away. That was a miscalculation. The reality is that they were so harsh to the colonists in Boston and in Massachusetts and in New England that colonists from all over the place really kind of banded together in support. Charities popped up to raise funds and to collect food and other products and things like that. And they were brought by wagon, not by ship, right? But they were brought by wagon and cart over land to support the people of Boston. So there was a huge effort underway to provide supplies, to aid in the defense, and to show resistance to the British. It really is this beautiful moment of unity for a lot of people who were independent-minded to begin with. So this was, again, the Crown's response to the Boston Tea Party, and ultimately it backfires and really kind of solidifies the idea that that if we want freedom, if we want out from under tyranny, we're going to have to fight for it. So anyway, that's it for today. We're going to see what follows in the next video. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already done so to get more of these videos pushed your way. But otherwise, leave your comments. Love to hear from you. And thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it.